This movie just may be the most brutal movie to ever take place within the DC cinematic universe. I mean, you got people getting shot in the head, you got people getting ripped apart. Yeah, this is probably the darkest yet. And I loved every second of it.
The following program is rated TV MALV. It contains strong language violence. It is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion advised.
So, The Suicide Squad is the second attempt, sequel, reboot, depending on whoever you may ask. Is the follow-up to the first Suicide Squad movie that came out in 2016, which was spearheaded by David Ayer, for the most part. This movie, on the other hand, has James Gunn taking the wheel, which is the same person that did those Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Also a person you could probably have mistaken him for being Harrison Wells off of the Flash television show. But unlike Marvel and his PG-13 films, it seems that DC told them to go wild with no restraint. And it shows. Jesus Christ, it shows. But what exactly is a Suicide Squad? Well, for the people that aren't into DC Comics and things like that, imagine a team of supervillains that have more than likely have done some terrible and unforgiving things to have them landed in a maximum security prison, either serving multiple life sentences or just straight up on death row. To make their lives a little bit more useful to the United States government, they came up with this wild idea.
I want to assemble a task force of the most dangerous people on the planet.
They're bad guys. Worst of the worst.
To put these villains on teams and send them out to do missions that are, well, suicidal. If they die, the United States would pretty much deny everything, thus keeping their hands clean and dissolve of any accountability. However, if they do complete their mission, these villains will have time cut off from the sentences and some other rewards. To keep somewhat of a leash on these members, each have a small bomb planted at the top of their spinal cord, so if they get out of line, it's kind of messed up, right? But America? The woman that's in charge of this operation is a woman by the name of Amanda Waller, which in both films was played by How to Get Away with Murder star Viola Davis. Ooh, and this bitch is cold. This bitch is ruthless.
That is just a mean lady.
Yeah.
Some of the things she do and how she manipulates will make the viewer side with the villains more than her.
Everyone stand down.
And you really gotta be a special somebody in order for you to sympathize with villains that probably killed children and people alike than her. But that, for the most part, is the overall gist of what the Suicide Squad, also known as Task Force X, is and what they do. This movie will explain all of that at the beginning at a breakneck speed. It's almost as if it assumes you saw the first film. And as the old saying goes, the game stays the same, but the players just change. This definitely applies to the Suicide Squad because, don't ever think that everybody makes it out of these missions alive. Please don't have this in mind, especially going into this movie. Do not grow attached to anybody. Anything can happen at any point in time and nobody is safe. But I have to give it to the comic book characters that they chose to be in this one. I know a lot of people aren't gonna know some of the characters that are here because, well, they're kind of like deep cut minor villains. Like if Batman and Superman was like the A-list, then some of these guys would be considered the last 4 letters of the alphabet tier. The standout, of course, is Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, of course. Now that I think about it, she's probably been featured in more DCEU movies than any other character. The other characters that would stand out to me are King Shark, which was played by Sylvester Stallone, Bloodsport played by Idris Elba, and John Cena playing a character that would be perfect within the Watchez series, known as the Peacemaker. But just looking at the lineup of characters within this movie, this particular squad around comes off as if a certain stereotype has been formed from the first film. Like if we look at the first film and compare it to this one, we have a guy that is an expert marksman with a somewhat strained relationship with his daughter. Not just thought that his relationship with his daughter was going to be just like Deadshot within the first film, but no. No, both of their relationships are totally different, and I am happy that they did that. A creature that seems to be spliced with some animal DNA, a character that wields a weapon that is passed down from a loved one, and lastly a person whose powers that orbit around some tragedy dealing with family members or friends that really don't talk much. The difference between this movie and the first is that since then, Harley Quinn has a couple of movies worth of character development. Rick Flag went from a generic soldier to somebody with a little bit more personality. Amanda Waller is a bitch more than ever. But other than that, you have a couple of returning characters and other people I really don't want to necessarily go too deep within because we're probably going to be here forever. But I insist you to look at the movie to understand why. So this time around, the squad's mission is just the same as the first movie. They are sent in the enemy's territory to complete a goal and inevitably end within a CGI battle or a giant sky beam. You should know how these movies go now. So they have to infiltrate this island filled with what seems to be a private army of some kind to retrieve something that could cause an uproar in the United States. Or at least that's what this movie would like to have the viewer to believe. Completing anything other than that, well, it's not America's problem. That's all I'm gonna say about the plot, but if you saw the trailer, you would know that they got my boy Starro in this film, and the first time I was ever introduced to this character was probably because of that Batman Beyond episode, or that 2-part episode when they brought in Superman. Man, that was still awesome. Yo, they need to bring back the DC animated universe, man. Like, this new one is cool, but I still like the old school. I'm just happy to see he got some shine. Also, the Thinker is in this movie too, and he's more of a Flash villain, just like Captain Boomerang, who makes a return. They did a better job of him in this movie than they did in that Flash season, because in that version, they just kind of made him behave and look like Brainiac. But as I said at the start of this review, this may very well be the most goriest and violent out of all the DCEU movies. People die in the most hilarious and painful ways, and some of them actually look like Mortal Kombat fatalities. For the sake of comedy, some of the other killings pretty much serve this punchlines to an audience that doesn't usually get the joke until the very end. A good example would be this jungle segment in this movie where Idris Elba and John Cena kind of showcase their talents as a hitman. And while I'm on these characters, both of them actually carry this movie. This little rivalry that they got between the two actually works in this movie, and it even sets up one of the most meanest parts in the movie that had me laughing. There are moments that through subtlety, the audience can pick up on things. A good example of this would actually be the character King Shark, who doesn't have that many lines and by far could have been the most easiest check Warner Brothers could probably ever offer Sylvester Stallone. But even with that being the case, there were scenes that required no dialogue in which you can actually understand through visuals and through circumstances that can make the audience just know how this character must have been feeling. And that's just a CGI character. You probably don't even know what this facial expression is, but you can probably get more feeling from that than actual human beings that play in some of these movies nowadays. That brings me to another point why I enjoyed this movie. The chemistry between the characters is at the forefront of this film, to the point where you end up caring about these misfits by the end of the movie. One good example would be Polka Dot Man. Fun fact, the only reason why he's even in this film is simply because James Gunn Googled who was the dumbest supervillain of all time, and at the top of every list was him, which is kinda hilarious, but also genius. Reason why this is genius on James Gunn's part is simply because he practically took a nobody, placed him in this movie, and now who was once dumb has obtained popularity. I mean, it's even a thing on Twitter right now. But as far as the character go within this movie, once you bypass all the creepy mannerisms,
We're all gonna die.
I hope so.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
you find out about him. One of his traits, however, becomes a running joke throughout the film. In that moment, I thought about what experiences may be like with that certain tendency he has going on, and it brings up more disturbing questions that I did not want the answer to. But you end up feeling for him as a person though, and especially by the end of the movie because he obtains a sense of purpose and a belonging. And the same concept can be applied to Ratcatcher number 2. Out of the bunch, she comes off as kind, well-mannered, and pretty much has like a positive demeanor.
To get you out of real life.
I'm going to get you out of here alive.
I would consider her being like the heart of the group. But I gotta admit, when I first started watching this, I was kind of wondering how in the hell did she actually ended up with a group like this. I would consider her and King Shark as being the ones that actually have like a childlike innocence to them. And I keep talking about King Shark, but going back to him, I didn't think I would like him as much as I did. The dude's a gentle giant, you know, when he's not doing, well, what sharks do. But going back to how this movie was done was just, chef's kiss. How this movie flowed was flawless, and instead of a lot of exposition just like the first movie gave, you actually get to see everything you really need to know. And if you get lost with what's going on, there are like these sections that's kind of marked off by these artistically designed headers that kind of gives the audience what's next on the agenda as far as the group is concerned. Not to mention what type of revelation is about to be revealed to you. This movie does a better job in giving backstory to some of the squad members than the first movie, which I could sum up like if I'm telling the beginning of a joke. So a bunch of anti-heroes and murderers and a US agent walk into a bar. ... This movie actually takes the time out for you to understand these characters, so you can get to know them a little bit. If you combine that with the good acting and how this movie was filmed, and also how this movie actually shows you the experiences that they went through rather than just drowning you in the ocean of obvious exposition, you'll actually get a movie that's memorable, something that you can actually go back and rewatch, like I did. James Gunn not only masterfully executed storytelling elements, but made what happened in the past give some sort of more of a significance and gravity to some of the scenes that happen in this movie. He actually humanizes every character in this movie, from humans to creatures to you name it. You can actually understand where they're coming from. And as I said before, this is a Suicide Squad movie, so I'm gonna say it just like the people in college what they tell the new incomers. Look left and to your right. Everybody that you came in with, it is no guarantee that they're gonna be the same people that you're gonna be finishing with. And I can't lie, there are certain people within this movie that once their life was terminated, I kind of felt bad for them because, you know, they kind of grew on me. This movie exceeded my expectations, and when I assumed that one thing was going to go one way, it actually goes another. But from the beginning to the end, this movie just hits you over the head with how morbid and unforgiving this film is. And because of it, it's what makes it even more enjoyable. How can I put this in other words? I got it. This movie actually brought me back to when I was a little kid, when I used to watch cartoons with Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Elmer Fudd, and the rest of the Looney Tunes gang. You see, in those cartoons, looking at it now as an adult, there were a lot of violent acts of cruelty that were being put on display. People got hit by vehicles, shot in the face, and all types of horrible ways to physically end a person's life. But around that time, watching those cartoons in my younger days, my level of morality and knowing right from wrong has already been established and solidified. So seeing a cartoon character being decapitated and stabbed is quite bad if you see it in real life, obviously, or unless it's within a horror movie. However, since the medium in which these acts presented is being brought to the audience genuinely for laughs, it kinda absolves it for any consequences of negative backlash if the viewer considers it funny. Unless you're just being overly sensitive, and in which case, good luck with life. So what am I saying? Well, essentially this movie with all this violence that be ensuing, it was actually fun to watch. I enjoyed myself. I think y'all should check it out too. Now with all that being said, there was something that I did take notice to. What I'm referring to is how this movie handles connecting this film to the other DCEU movies, but mainly the first Suicide Squad movie. When Harley Quinn sees people she recognizes, she just says one line, possibly referring back to the first film. A microsecond and you would have missed this. Personally, if by chance I saved the world from an ancient evil, I probably would have displayed a little bit more excitement, let alone emotion if I saw them again. Like in this movie when Harley Quinn says a brief hello to a certain somebody, I would have probably asked how his girlfriend was doing. Just to be funny. But yeah, this movie kind of like tries to disown the first film. But then on the flip side, there was this segment in the movie regarding Harley Quinn and this little spiel she gave during this situation that she was in. Now, if you saw the first Suicide Squad movie and also The Birds of Prey, it's kind of easier to understand what she was saying because the viewer literally saw her journey leading up to the Harley Quinn that she is now. But if you've been along for the ride, you kind of see why she does what she does in a specific scene in this movie. And again, I can't say this enough, I enjoyed this movie. I even went back to watch the first film just so I can appreciate how far the DCEU has come. Which is unfortunately not where it should be because of a lot of things. You have Warner Brothers not allowing the directors to do their thing and making themselves look like asses when the director's version of their films outshined the manufacturing monstrosities they put out. The mere fact that this is a tendency with these films only makes me want to see the David Ayers cut of the Suicide Squad movie even more. Then you have other problems that kind of rear its head every once in a while, like not knowing if actors are going to be reprising their roles or even leaving. Also, you got films that were being released that weren't terrible but just left people asking, why? And then you have rumors of people that are in charge quite possibly erasing everything that's making this DCEU become something potentially more greater than what it is, effectively making things not be canon when it should be and making things that shouldn't be canon, canon. In other words, a soft reboot of some sort. Rumors were that this was possibly going to start with, you know, The Flash, because of Flashpoint. If you don't know about it, read the comics. This is just all types of mess, and if things don't shape up, I can easily see this becoming another version of the X-Men films and that continuity situation. So if you don't catch my drift, restore the Snyderverse. And while I'm on that topic, the Zack Snyder Justice League was not the first film that he released that has a director's cut that's damn near 4 hours long. If you got the time, go ahead and check out Watchmen Ultimate Edition. Now, where was I? Oh yeah. As far as the future going forward, if allowing James Gunn to run wild like he did with this film is a sign of things to come, I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was before seeing this film, and also the possibility of the DCEU direction when it comes to his movies or even his tie-in spin-offs. Now that I do say that, I believe that he's in charge of an upcoming series that's centered around one of these characters in the film. Oh, and another fun fact, did you know that this movie would have had the Suicide Squad going head-to-head with an evil Superman? Now, think about that, like the Suicide Squad going against the last son of Krypton. Already the thought of such happening is rather interesting, but that's only because I don't think the Suicide Squad will have a chance in hell of surviving. For a second, just think about it. You have an acrobatic woman who bashes people with blunt objects, beasts, and all, of course, if things fail, people that shoot guns. Now, in one of the Suicide Squad trailers for introducing the character, they said,
Robert Dubois. He's in prison for putting Superman in the ICU with a kryptonite bullet.
I want to see this. I want to see how he pulled that off. But ironically enough, there's already a game that's going to be coming out somewhere in the future that has a similar premise. But can you imagine how that would have gone with an evil, or at least in my educated guess, a mind-controlled Superman? Now, if you don't know, James Gunn already released a movie of what would happen if Superman was evil, and from that film, it may have insinuated the notion that he may be setting up somewhat of an alternate Earth with a more sinister version of the Justice League. I find that quite interesting, and I pray that this continues and doesn't end up like the other cinematic universes that was short-lived. Yo, I have a weird idea. What would happen if James Gunn was able to build this somewhat James Gunn-verse of some sort, and somehow was allowed it to be canon within the DC universe? That would actually be kind of awesome to see. Like, what would happen if the Snyderverse went against the James Gunn-verse? Could this happen? Probably not, but then again, considering how the 2 years have been going, man, anything is possible. Now, is there anything else I want to say before I end this review? Oh yeah, Margot Robbie did her thing in this movie. She showcased her physical dexterity, and the woman got skills. All you need to know that there was no props needed. It was just her, chains, her feet, and a key, and she did that thing. But anyway, y'all, I ain't gonna hold y'all no longer than what I already have. So if you liked or hated this movie, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let's dialogue. So until next time, peace out.